Part 2 of Harris, Hegel, and the Psychologic System, Outlines of Hegel's Logic as translated by Harris. Now let me warn you, there will be a lot of repetition in the upcoming sections. Alright, Harris believed that the science of logic was the study of thought, or the thinking activity. Being, for Harris, is when the will, unified with the intellect, comes to consciousness. Being is self-activity for Harris. We, all animals, plants, rocks, humans, follow the natural logic or natural laws. Logic has for its content the determinations particular to the thinking activity, which have no other ground than the thinking. Ideas and representations are the content of thought. Thinking activity consists in bringing the manifold into unity. When the mind thinks upon things, it brings them into simple forms, which are its pure determinations. The manifold is at first the seizing of the immediate manifold in the form of the feeling and the sensuous. This is not thinking, because the relating of the same is thinking. The immediate seizing of the manifold we call feeling or sensation. Feeling becomes intuition when it is determined in space and time. A trained intuition is conscious will and intellect. Conscious will and intellect are the thinking activity. Self-activity, or being. The thinking activity is abstraction. If I neglect all determinations of an object, nothing remains but an empty self-activity. If I neglect one and select another, then the latter becomes abstract. The ego, for example, is an abstract determination. I know of the ego only insofar as I exclude all determinations from myself. This is a negative means. I negate the determinations of myself and leave myself as such alone by myself. The act of abstraction is the negative side of the thinking activity. The content of representations are notions or concepts taken from experience. But the form of unity itself and its further determinations have not their source in the immediate as such, but in the thinking activity. The ego is a thinking activity, and it is that always, because we are all egos. We always think. Ego is always the identity with itself, and this is thinking. As ego, we are the ground of all our determinations insofar as the object of thought. It receives the form of thinking and becomes the thought object. It is made identical to the ego. It is thought. In the speculative journal, Harris describes the speculative as the final high-grain stage point of the self-activity. In the sixth book of Plato's Republic, Plato offers two grades of sinuous knowing. And then he offers the grade of understanding. The understanding is necessary because the sensuous does not deal with principles, but only with results. One is the speculative grade of knowing, in which the soul, setting out from a hypothesis, proceeds to an unhypothetical principle and makes its way without the aid of sensuous images, but solely through ideas themselves. Plato gives two examples of the method of understanding. While he makes the speculative reason that which posits hypotheses by the dialectic, not as fixed principles, but only as starting points, so that by removing them, it may arrive at the unhypothetical, the principle of the universe. Aristotle in the Metaphysics describes the first principle of the speculative ontology, starting with motion as a hypothesis that the self moved. In the De Anima, Aristotle distinguishes psychology, the active intellect, as the highest form of thinking. The active intellect is that which is its own object, subject and object, and hence as containing its own end and aim in itself. Its aim is being infinite. Harris calls this the speculative result, which he found ontologically as the absolute. Spinoza describes in his Ethics as the thinking of things under the form of eternity. This is the foundation of the logic, the self-mover, self-activity, and thought activity as being. And the self-activity can be seen in Harris's psychologic system, which it will be the third and final section. And I haven't read it all the way through yet, but I think it will be maybe slightly less dense, or if as dense, less complicated, maybe less prolix, but only slightly. So if you made it through, please, I apologize for all the errors. I think one day I'll go back and I'll go back over all these, but right now I just want to hurry up and get this out there. Thank you.